Welcome to the Messy Middle Season 2. I am your host, Jamila, and this season we're having real conversations from women standing in the middle of a turning point. So, short story. A woman I know, and we'll call her Renee, spent most of her adult life convincing herself she didn't really need much from people. She'd say things like, I'm low maintenance, or whatever works for you is fine, even when it wasn't fine at all. She was the friend who adjusted, the daughter who made do, and the partner who swallowed disappointment and called it understanding. One day, she finally worked up the courage to tell someone close to her what she needed. Something simple but honest. She said, I need you to show up when you say you will, because when you disappear, I feel unimportant. The person didn't argue or get angry. They simply shrugged it off, minimized it, and moved on as if nothing had been said. Renee went home feeling smaller than when she started. And instead of thinking that response was hurtful, she told herself, this is why I shouldn't say anything at all. This is why I keep my needs to myself. Naming her needs didn't feel empowering. It felt risky and exposing, like stepping into traffic without knowing whether anyone planned to slow down. What stayed with her wasn't the conversation itself, but the belief it reinforced. It felt safer to silence myself than to risk being unseen when I speak. Pardon me. Today, we are talking about what happens when naming your needs doesn't just feel vulnerable, but it feels risky. The moments when speaking up brings a knot to your stomach, when you hesitate because you're afraid of what might shift once the truth leaves your mouth. For a lot of us, the fear isn't about whether our needs are valid, it's about what might happen after we say them out loud. Will the relationship change? Will someone withdraw? That tension sits in the center of this conversation because when naming your needs feels risky, it usually has less to do with the words themselves and more to do with the history that shaped how we learn to survive in our relationships. For many women, especially those of us who were taught to be strong, accommodating, or easy to deal with, our relationships with our needs was shaped long before adulthood. It was shaped in environments where emotional room was limited, in friendships where we became the dependable one, and in relationships where being low maintenance was praised. Over time, you learn who is allowed to take up space and who keeps the peace by shrinking. Some of us were conditioned to be grateful for whatever we were given, to adjust without complaint, to swallow disappointment quietly, and to make ourselves small in the name of harmony. After enough repetition, though, silence stops feeling like suppression and starts feeling like stability. So, when you finally reach the point where something in you says, I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter, your body begins to react like it's facing danger. Not because you're fragile or dramatic, but because your nervous system remembers the last time you spoke up and you were dismissed, minimized, or made to feel like you were asking for too much. You're not afraid of having needs, you're afraid of what revealing them might cost you. Here is a truth that can be uncomfortable to sit with. Naming your needs creates clarity, and clarity has consequences. Sometimes that clarity leads to deeper intimacy, healthier connection, and genuine repair. Oftentimes, it exposes misalignment. When you say, I need consistency, or I need reciprocity, or I need communication that matches your actions, you're not just sharing a preference, you're drawing a boundary around your emotional reality. And once that boundary is spoken, the other person has a choice to make. Some people lean in and grow, others show you that they never intended to. Even when that truth hurts, it doesn't mean naming your needs created a problem. It means it uncovered the truth of what was already there. There's another layer we don't talk about enough. Sometimes the fear isn't that the other person won't meet your needs. Sometimes the fear is that they will. Because if they do, you have to accept that you deserve that level of care. You have to release the identity built around I don't need much or I'll adjust to whatever works. And once you experience connection where you are considered, respected, and emotionally safe, you can't unlearn that feeling. You won't be able to tolerate crumbs the way you once did. Growth rearranges things. Sometimes your relationships, sometimes your tolerance, and sometimes your sense of who you are allowed to be. That rearranging can be uncomfortable, but dignity often begins right there. The tension often shows up in the quiet moments after you've named a need. That pause while you wait for a response. Memories surface, patterns replay. You find yourself bracing before anything even happens. Maybe you soften what you said. Maybe you shrink the request. Maybe you start doubting whether you should have brought it up at all. That isn't weakness. It's a survival strategy shaped through repetition. For years, your peace depended on how well you could disappear. But this season of your life calls for something different. Your peace now lives in alignment, and alignment requires honesty, even when honesty unsettles the room. Naming your needs does not have to be confrontational or harsh. Sometimes it sounds like I don't have the capacity for one sided relationships anymore, or I feel dismissed when what matters to me is minimized, or I want effort that reflects mutual care, or I can't carry this relationship by myself. Your needs aren't demands, they are conditions that you allow to stay present as your whole self. If someone can tolerate you when you are quiet, accommodating, and self sacrificing, that isn't compatibility. That's convenience masquerading as connection. And yes, sometimes people respond poorly. Not because your need was unreasonable, but because your need requires growth from them. Growth invites reflection, reflection requires accountability, and accountability exposes where someone has been coasting. Instead of leaning in, they may minimize, deflect, or turn the narrative back on you. And in those moments, it's easy to question whether speaking up was a mistake, but it wasn't. Even when the outcome is painful, telling your truth about your needs protects you from a quieter, slower version of abandonment, the kind where you abandon yourself to keep others comfortable. So, if you're in a season where naming your needs feels risky, I want you to remember this. You are not asking for too much because you want to be considered. You're not difficult for wanting mutual effort. You're not unreasonable for needing emotional safety. You are honoring the truth that your presence deserves reciprocity, not proximity. And yes, honoring that truth may shift who stays and who slowly steps back. That shift can feel lonely, but it is also clarifying. The people who remain are the ones who can respect you in your fullness, not just your silence. You don't have to chase people to prove your worth showing up for. You don't have to shrink yourself to stay connected to anyone who only handles you when you're quiet. Naming your needs may change some relationships, but it also strengthens the relationship you have with yourself. Some people will rise, some won't. And that clarity is still a win because you're no longer abandoning yourself to keep the peace. If naming your needs feels risky right now, remember this. Discomfort doesn't always mean you're wrong. Sometimes it simply means you're finally outgrowing the spaces where you had to disappear. If this episode resonated, sit with it for a bit. Notice where naming your needs still feels risky, and notice where you've already started honoring yourself in ways you didn't before. And if something in this conversation brought clarity, I'd love for you to share it with someone who may be wrestling with the same tension because none of us have to navigate these shifts alone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for choosing yourself in real time, even when it's uncomfortable. Until next time, take care of your heart, tell the truth about what you need, and keep giving yourself permission to take up space in your own life. See you guys next week.